October 11th, 1896, a man walks the streets of London on his way to the house of Dr. James Cantley. His name is Sun Yat Sen. On the way, however, he's stopped by two men excited to see another countryman. They ask him if he wants tea, but he declines and says he'll come back another time. However, they insist and take his arm as they guide him into the building. But then the door slams. It's a trap. In this episode, we will once again talk about things from the 19th century, but it is important as we will discuss the buildup of Republican ideas, then the life of Sun Yat Sen, and the failed attempts at revolution, then the spark that eventually burnt the Qing dynasty. After the Boxer Rebellion in the last video, the Qing government rushed to introduce reforms as the Qing court finally gave up on keeping things the way they were. They created the Administration Office, a branch of the Qing court which oversaw reforms. They presented many points which could lead reform in the right direction, learning from Japan and implementing a constitutional monarchy. In 1905, Empress Dowager Cixi sent 5 ministers abroad to learn about constitutional monarchy and report on how to implement this in China. They came back with info from Austria-Hungary, the UK, Netherlands, Russia, Sweden, and Germany. Soon they returned. In 1907, Cixi began deteriorating in her health, however, and eventually her successor was selected, Ishian Goryeo-Puyi. The Qing announced that they would create a democratically elected parliament, and the first election would happen in 1909. However, on November 14, 1908, Emperor Guangxu died, and Cixi also died the next day. Puyi was then made the 2-year-old Emperor of China. In 1909, the Qing parliamentary elections occurred, and the Constitutionalists won. Sun Yat Sen, who we'll get into later, was on the ballot despite being in exile. He won very few seats. By this point, most provinces had assemblies, and in 1910, the provinces all held their own elections. Prince Regent Saifeng became Prince Regent of the Qing dynasty and created an imperial cabinet. The next reforms were in the military. First off, the system where the provinces controlled the military was blamed as the main cause of China's loss in the Boxer Rebellion. The Beiyang army would remain the most elite force, but now all regiments would be modernized and controlled by a military commander in Peking. Telegraph lines made it easier and faster to communicate across the country, so someone in Peking could realistically control forces as far away as Tibet. Equipment was also improved and tactics modernized. In 1902, the Beiyang Navy was created, which was the elite force of the Qing Navy, including modern ships, ironclads, torpedo boats, and they were also experimenting with submarines. Lastly, although they never established an air force, the Qing government did experiment with planes and did build an airport in Peking. It is now that we introduce the man that we will be following for the next few episodes. Buckle in, cause this gets interesting. Sun Yat Sen was born in southern China in what is now known as Zhongshan on November 12, 1866, coming from a poor family with his father working 2 jobs in Portuguese Macau. During primary school, he also met his lifelong friend Liu Haodong. After primary school, he moved to Honolulu in the Kingdom of Hawaii with his family. He lived a comfortable life supported by his brother, who had gotten rich in Hawaii. During his stay in Honolulu, Sun Yat Sen went to Ilawani School, where he studied English, British history, mathematics, science, and Christianity. Although he was originally unable to speak English, Sun Yat Sen picked it up quickly and received a prize from the King of Hawaii for his academic achievements. Then he studied at Oahu College, where he read the story of George Washington and the American Revolution, and grew to love it. But one day, Sun Yat-sen came home and asked to be baptized. His brother thought that that was enough and sent him back to southern China. Afterwards, he and Lu Haodong, who he had met up with again, tore down a statue of a Chinese god at a local temple, getting him banished to Hong Kong. But he loved it in Hong Kong, seeing it as modern, with transport, banking, and clean streets. Only a few miles away from his hometown. The contrast was stark. Then, Sun got a medical degree, but Hong Kong for some reason would not let him work there, so he moved to Macau and opened up a pharmacy, giving away free medicine. He eventually did go back to Hong Kong and made friends who loved to talk about Chinese politics and the situation back in China. They even ended up planning anti-Qing uprisings, although at the moment they couldn't carry out any of them. In 1894, he visited Peking to see the capital of China and to deliver reforms directly to the Qing, but they refused. His mind was now no longer on reform, but overthrow. He went back to Hawaii and founded the Revived China Society, saying, quote, "I am a doctor, but before treating my patients, I must cure my country." People chipped in money, and his brother also sold land to fund it. 3 months after, many people moved back to Hong Kong to plan an uprising. He met a man named Young Kuan, who also had a secret society, and had been acquiring weapons for 3 years. He agreed to merge with the Revived China Society. The uprising was planned, and everyone was ready. While planning this, Sun's friend Lu Haodong made a flag for them, a white sun on a blue background. In Guangzhou, many soldiers were laid off after the Boxer Rebellion, unhappy and unpaid, so it was easy to convince them to join. They raised 3,000 troops and assembled in Hong Kong. They chose October 26th as the uprising date, and the guns were shipped in secret to Guangzhou. However, when Sun and the others made their way there, they were met by police. Someone had leaked the plan. They weaved in between alleys, avoiding police. Chaos reigned, and Sun fled to Macau, taking the first ferry out of there. But Lu Haodong ran back to find the membership book that had all the names of the Revived China Society members. He then burnt it to ashes. Eventually, the ship Sun Yat-sen was on landed in Japan. He read the news. He was apparently now banned from Hong Kong. Sun Yat-sen eventually found out that Lu Haodong was taken after burning the membership book, and refused to talk. He was executed the day after. The news was now calling for a revolution, legitimizing Sun's struggle. He knew that it was not in vain. But he needed to change his appearance if he wanted to stay alive. He cut off his long hair, which was mandated by law, and bought Western clothes with new slicked hair. He went around Hawaii and America, trying to raise money, but got very few. He then received an invite from his medical professor from Hong Kong, Dr. James Cantley, to visit him in London, since he was now banned from Hong Kong. While he was there, he read about government, economics, and talked with Cantley, but the entire time he was being watched by a British agency that was hired to track him, and the Chinese legation was ready. As Sun walked the streets, he met 2 Chinese men, and they asked him if he wanted tea. He said no, but they insisted. They half-jokingly began pulling him in, and barred the door behind him as soon as he got in. Sun knew that this was a trap. Then a man came in and interrogated him, telling him that this was the Chinese embassy and British law did not apply, but they were waiting further orders from Peking. For the next little while, Sun begs the British maid to take his notes and send them to Cantley, but she just takes his money and throws the notes out. Eventually, he's informed about the passage back and that he will be executed once he reaches China. But finally, the British maid delivers the note, placing it under Cantley's door. As soon as he figured out, he freaked out and ran to the house of another guy he knew named Sir Halliday Macartney. He has fought against the Qing in the Taiping Civil War and had connections in Peking. If anyone could get Sun out, that was who. But Cantley couldn't find him at his house. Little does he know that Macartney works at the Chinese legation, and he is the one keeping Sun kidnapped. Cantley goes to the police station, but the police don't trust him. He goes to the Foreign Office, but they don't want to help him to risk an international incident. Cantley hires a detective to watch the legation, and he later receives 2 letters from Sun in his own handwriting, which was hard evidence. However, Cantley hired the same detective agency that the Chinese legation did. They decide not to smuggle Sun out because they know about Cantley's plans. Within hours, press and police are surrounding the legation, and the headlines run wild that a Chinese man has been kidnapped in London. Finally, the legation caves and lets him out. This incident has turned him into an international celebrity, and it was good as well, because Sun was perfect for the press. He was good at manipulating his message to different audiences to appeal to Western and Chinese audiences, playing up his Christian faith for Western audiences and saving his radical ideas for Chinese ears. And he was kind of good at English as well, which was rare for Chinese people at the time. Newspapers couldn't get enough of him. He created plans for a fairer economic system and even began buying land in China and selling it at a lower price. He eventually wrote down all his ideas, which were inspired but not directly socialist. While in London, he was introduced to an ideology called Pan-Asianism, suggesting that all Asian countries should unify to fight against Western imperialism. A Japanese guide told him that Tokyo was the place to meet with people who shared a similar sentiment. It was full of anti-Qing societies, Philippine independence activists, and Japanese nationalists. So, the first chance he got, Sun hopped on a ship bound for Tokyo. Meanwhile, back in China, others were rebelling. In China, there are too many to go off, but there are some that are worth noting. The Huizhou Uprising, the Ming Uprising, the Pingyue Uprising, the Anhui Uprising, the Nadqingzhou Uprising, the Hakao Uprising, and the Guangxu New Army Uprising. Despite the seemingly unorganized nature of this, there was one person that was rallying all of these groups together, and that was Sun Yat-sen. He organized them and also made new uprisings even while in exile, under the name of the Tongminhui. Even in exile, he was still making the Qing's life hard. Eventually, authorities grew suspicious about them, and most of the organizations were shut down, only for them to regroup under different names and in different locations. Amazingly, 1/3 of the army was secretly on the side of the rebellion. It was only a matter of time. Sun Yat-sen arrived in Tokyo and made connections with friends, including Matsuke Toto, who they became great friends with despite a language barrier. The Japanese nationalists approved of him and gave him a house, even while Sun was trying to undermine Japanese occupation in Taiwan, making contacts from around China and even funding Philippine independence activists. But the ship full of guns sank on its way to the Philippines, and there was no anti-American uprising there. Then, many of Sun's buildings were destroyed, and eventually, Sun orchestrated another uprising in southern China. 10,000 men joined, but the plan hinged on Japan sending them weapons. There were no weapons, so the uprising was called off. Sun hit the road on another fundraising trip, using the example of the Russo-Japanese War to show what Asian countries could do against European powers, saying, "Imagine what a reorganized China could do." He went to Europe and was asked to speak by many colleges in the UK and Germany. He also presented his 3 principles: nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihood. He was now popular within the elite all around the world. Publications spread his ideals, and he planned and organized 8 revolts in 3 years. It was taking its toll, however. Friends and comrades died in each uprising, and he was eventually kicked out of Japan as they did not want their reputation tarnished. He eventually moved to French Vietnam and was banned there. Then, he eventually became banned from almost every Asian country. He raised funds for one more uprising on the 10th of October 1911. Revolutionaries were messing around with bombs in a stronghold in Wuchang. However, the bomb exploded. These men didn't know it, but this explosion would light a spark and an uprising that would bring 2,000 years of imperial rule crashing down. But that's for next episode.